The massive warship Valkyra hovered over Earth's surface, its dark metal hull reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Commander Railzor of the Xilari Empire stood on the bridge, staring at the planet below. His golden eyes narrowed. This was supposed to be a dead world. Yet, something felt wrong. "Scanners?" he asked, his voice sharp. The officer beside him checked the readings. "No life detected, Commander. The planet is lifeless, just as the records say." Railzor exhaled, but the tension in his chest did not ease. 40,000 years ago, the Xilari had wiped out humanity, their greatest enemy, gone forever. And yet, why did this place feel so unnatural? He turned to his crew. "Deploy the scouting teams. I want a full search of this planet. If there were any secrets left behind, he would find them." The descent into silence. The landing crafts touched down in the middle of what was once a mighty human city. Towers stood like the bones of giants, shattered and covered in dust. Squad leader Vektal led his team through the ruins, their armored boots crunching over debris. His tail flicked with impatience. "Keep your weapons ready," he ordered. "I don't like this place." The soldiers moved cautiously. There were no bodies, no remains, just empty streets and silent buildings. A cold wind blew through the hollow city, carrying whispers of a long-forgotten war. Then the comms crackled. "Sir," a soldier's voice came through, uncertain. "We found something." Vektal and his team rushed to the location. The soldier was standing before a large metal hatch, partially buried under rubble. It was not human-made. Vektal frowned. "Commander, we found an underground structure. It's still powered." There was a long pause before Railzor's voice came through. "Enter it. Report what you find." The forgotten morning. The Xilari soldiers forced the hatch open. A staircase led down into darkness. The air was heavy, ancient. The walls pulsed with a faint blue glow, as if the structure itself was alive. Vektal stepped inside, gripping his weapon tightly. They moved deeper, their footsteps echoing in the silent corridor. Symbols carved into the walls glowed faintly, a language long lost to time. Then they reached a control panel. A soldier hesitated. "Should we activate it?" Vektal considered for a moment. Then he pressed a button. The room came alive. Lights flared to life. Machines hummed. And then a message played. A voice, old and distorted, echoed through the chamber. It spoke in flawless Xilari. "To those who walk in the ashes of our world." The soldiers froze. "Turn back. Leave this place. For if you are hearing this, then you are already dead." Silence. Vektal's blood ran cold. "Commander, you need to hear this." Railzor's voice was calm, almost amused. "Idle threats. Humanity is gone. Keep searching." Then another sound. A low mechanical hum filled the chamber. The walls trembled. The floor shifted beneath them. Something was awakening. And then a final message appeared on the screen. One word. "Run." Cliffhanger. Above, on the bridge of the Valkyra, alarms blared. "Commander," an officer shouted. "Something is rising from beneath the surface." Railzor turned to the main screen, his golden eyes widening. On the planet below, the ruins of Earth began to move. Something had been waiting. And now, it had awakened. The ground rumbled. Vektal barely had time to react before the walls of the underground chamber shook violently. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as a deep mechanical hum echoed through the tunnels. The message on the ancient screen flickered. The last warning, 8RUN, remained glowing in the dim light. "Commander," Vektal shouted into his comm. "Something is activating. We need immediate extraction." But there was no response. Only static. Above, aboard the Valkyra. On the bridge of the Xilari warship, Commander Railzor stood frozen as the main screen displayed something impossible. The ruins of Earth were moving. At first, he thought it was an earthquake. But then, beneath the layers of dust and destruction, massive structures began to emerge, towers rising, panels shifting, energy pulsing. It was not a dead planet. It was a sleeping fortress. "Commander," an officer stammered, "we are detecting a power surge. The planet is coming back online." Railzor's grip tightened on the edge of the console. Impossible. Humanity was wiped out. They should have been gone forever. And yet, Earth was awakening. Below, in the depths of Earth, Vectel's squad ran through the shaking corridors, their armored boots pounding against metal floors. "This place isn't a ruin," a soldier gasped. "It's a—" Before he could finish, the walls split open. Metal arms extended from hidden compartments, mechanical sentries unfolding with gleaming red eyes. Then the first shot was fired. A beam of pure blue energy struck a soldier, vaporizing him in an instant. "Take cover," Vectel roared. The soldiers opened fire, their plasma rifles lighting up the dark corridors. The sentries moved with inhuman precision, dodging bullets and striking back with deadly accuracy. One by one, the auxiliary troops fell. Vectel ducked behind a console, heart pounding. His squad was being wiped out. They had awakened something they should have left buried. And now, they would pay the price. The message from the dead. Then, the screens around the chamber changed. The distorted human voice returned, calm but deadly. "You did not listen." Vectel stared in horror as the lights turned blood red. "You were warned." Something huge moved in the shadows beyond the sentries. A shape, a figure, standing at the end of the hall. It was humanoid, but not alive. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Vectel. "Now, you run." The auxiliary soldiers ran. Vectel's breath came in sharp gasps as he sprinted through the underground corridors, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. Behind him, the mechanical sentries advanced with terrifying precision, their glowing red eyes unblinking. Blaster fire rained down the hallway. A soldier beside him screamed as a blue energy beam cut through his armor, reducing him to nothing but ash. Vectel didn't stop. He couldn't. There was no time to fight. Only one thing mattered now. Escape. Aboard the Valkyra. Commander Railzor clenched his fists as he watched the disaster unfold on the main screen. "How many survivors?" he demanded. An officer's voice was filled with panic. "Less than half the ground team remains. The sentries, they're slaughtering them." Railzor gritted his teeth. This was not supposed to happen. Humanity was dead. This planet should have been nothing more than a graveyard. And yet it was fighting back. Then another alarm blared across the bridge. "Commander," another officer shouted, "something is locking onto our ship." Railzor turned sharply. "What?" "The planet. It's generating an energy field. We're being trapped." Railzor's golden eyes widened. He had seen planetary defenses before, but never like this. This was a trap, and they had walked straight into it. Beneath the surface, Vectel and the few remaining soldiers burst into a large open chamber, their boots skidding against the metal floor. "Command, we need evac now," Vectel shouted into his comm. Static. The signal was being jammed. One of his soldiers pointed ahead. There, an exit. A massive metal doorway stood at the far end of the chamber, leading back to the surface. Freedom. But then, the room came to life. Walls shifted, dust fell. The ground vibrated as if something ancient was waking up beneath their feet. And then, from the shadows, they emerged. The guardians of Earth. Tall figures stepped into the dim red light, humanoid, but not alive. Their bodies were made of metal and unknown alloys, sleek and battle-scarred from wars long forgotten. Their eyes burned red, scanning the auxiliary intruders. Then, the first one spoke. Not in an alien tongue, not in a dead language, but in perfect Silari. "You came to steal from the dead." The auxiliary troops froze in horror. Now, the dead will claim you. One guardian raised its hand. A pulse of blue energy surged forward. The first auxiliary soldier collapsed instantly, his body shutting down like a machine. Vektil's instincts screamed, "Run!" The Valkyrie was no longer alone in orbit. Commander Railzor stared at the main screen, his golden eyes narrowing in disbelief. From the dark side of the moon, colossal warships emerge, ancient, silent, and fully operational. Their dark hulls bore no markings, but there was no doubt about who had built them. Humanity. And they were waiting. Aboard the Valkyrie. "Impossible," one of Railzor's officers whispered. "They should be dead. We destroyed them." Railzor remained silent. His mind worked rapidly, analyzing the situation. These ships had been hidden for 40,000 years. Their technology was still active. Their power cores burned with the energy of a long-lost civilization. And now, they had awakened. Railzor gritted his teeth. "All ships, prepare for emergency retreat. We are leaving this system now." A weapons officer turned in panic. "Commander, we can't jump to FTL. The planet is still generating an energy field." Trapped. Beneath the surface, Vektil and his remaining soldiers ran for their lives. Behind them, the metallic guardians pursued with cold, relentless efficiency. Their glowing red eyes tracked every movement, their weapons charged with deadly energy. One soldier turned and fired. His plasma round struck the nearest guardian. Nothing. The bullets melted against its armor like water on steel. The guardian raised its hand. A pulse of blue energy shot forward. The soldier froze mid-step, his body locked in place, muscles stiff, eyes wide with terror. Then he collapsed. His suit still functioned, his heart still beat, but his mind was gone. Erased. Vektil felt pure horror creeping into his bones. This was not a fight. This was execution. They had stepped into a graveyard designed to kill intruders. And now, the dead were making sure no one left alive. The last stand. The exit was just ahead, a towering metal doorway leading back to the surface. If they could reach it, maybe, just maybe, they could signal their ship. Vektil turned to his squad. "Move, don't stop." The door slammed shut. "Sealed." A deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "You were warned." The walls shook. The guardians advanced. The auxiliary were trapped. And above them, in the blackness of space, the ancient human fleet activated its weapons. Aboard the Valkyrie, alarms screamed across the auxiliary warship. Commander Railzor gripped the console, his golden eyes locked onto the screen. The ancient human fleet had fully emerged from the darkness. And now, their weapons were charging. "Status report." Railzor barked. A weapons officer's voice was shaking. "Commander, they are targeting us. All of them." Railzor felt his blood run cold. This wasn't a warning. This was judgment. The human ships had been waiting for thousands of years. And now, the auxiliary had stepped into their trap. "Raise shields," he ordered. "All fighters, launch now." But deep down, he knew the truth. They were outmatched. Beneath the surface, Vektil and his remaining soldiers stood cornered. The exit was sealed, the guardians closing in. Their glowing red eyes burned with silent purpose. "Commander, come in," Vektil shouted into his comm, but only static answered. One of his soldiers trembled. "This is a tomb, and we're going to die in it." The guardians stepped forward. Then, the walls shook violently. A deep, rumbling explosion echoed through the chamber. Vektil turned, eyes wide. From the ceiling, cracks spread like lightning. Dust and metal rained down. Something above them had just opened fire. Orbit. The first shot. The human fleet fired. Beams of pure white-hot energy tore through the void, cutting through the auxiliary ships like paper. The first auxiliary cruiser erupted into flames, breaking apart in a silent explosion. Another ship tried to evade. Too late. A pulse cannon ripped through its hull, sending it spiraling toward Earth's surface. Railzor watched in horror as his fleet was annihilated within seconds. He had fought countless battles, conquered hundreds of worlds. But this was not a battle. This was a massacre. All ships, re-to-re-at, he roared. But there was nowhere to run. Beneath the surface, the escape. Vectel barely had time to react before the ceiling collapsed. A massive chunk of debris crushed several Guardians, sending up a cloud of dust and sparks. It was now or never. "Move," Vectel shouted, leading his soldiers through the chaos. The Guardians, though powerful, had been caught off guard. The auxiliary sprinted toward the exit as another explosion rocked the underground structure. A Guardian reached for Vectel. He dove forward just as a falling metal beam crashed between them. He didn't look back. With a final leap, Vectel reached the door, and it suddenly opened. The auxiliary burst onto the surface, gasping for breath. The sky above was filled with fire and destruction. Their ships were burning. Their fleet was dying. And above them, the ancient human fleet moved like predators closing in on their prey. Aboard the Valkyrie, Commander Railzor gripped the edge of his command console, his claws digging into the metal. His fleet was being torn apart. The human ships moved like ghosts, silent, precise, unstoppable. Auxiliary vessels tried to flee, engines burning white-hot, but the ancient human weapons struck with deadly accuracy. One by one, the auxiliary warships were erased. Damage report. Railzor snapped. An officer's voice shook. Shields at 12%. Weapons offline. Our FTL drive is. He hesitated. Railzor turned sharply. What about the FTL drive? The officer swallowed hard. It's disabled. We can't jump. Railzor's heart pounded. No escape. For the first time, he realized the truth. This was never a battle. This was an execution. On the surface, Vectel and his soldiers stood in the ruins of Earth, watching the auxiliary fleet burn. One of the soldiers gasped. "They're killing everyone." Vectel's eyes darted to the sky. The Valkyrie, their flagship, was still afloat, but barely. It wouldn't last much longer. He tapped his comm. "Commander, you have to get us out of here." Static. Then, Railzor's voice came through, cold, resigned. "There is no escape, Vectel." Vectel's blood ran cold. What are you saying?" A long pause. Then the voice of the dead returned. "You did not listen." The auxiliary soldiers froze. The warning message, it wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. The ground beneath them trembled again. From the ruins, massive mechanical structures rose, towers that had been buried for millennia. Their lights flickered back to life, pulsing like a long-dormant heart now beating again. Vectel's eyes widened. No, this planet isn't just a graveyard. It's a weapon. The final move. Aboard the Valkyrie, Railzor clenched his fists. There was only one option left. "Charge what remains of our weapons," he ordered. "If we're going to die, we take at least one of them with us." An officer hesitated. "Commander, that won't." "Do it," Railzor roared. The ship's last reserves of energy were redirected to the cannons. The Valkyrie turned, targeting the largest human warship. Fire. A blinding plasma beam tore through the void. And then, before it could reach the target, the human warship vanished. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Gone. Railzor's breath caught. Impossible. Then, something moved behind them. The same warship had reappeared, now directly above the Valkyrie. And it fired. The blast ripped through the flagship, its armor melting like ice and fire. Railzor's vision blurred as the ship's alarms turned to a single, endless scream. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The bridge was collapsing. And as the fire spread, he realized. This was how humanity had planned it. They were never gone. They had simply waited for the Xilari to come. And now, they would finish what was started. On the surface, the awakening. Vectel stumbled as the ground beneath him shook violently. The ruins of Earth were no longer silent. The dead world had come back to life. Towering structures, buried for 40,000 years, rose from the dust. Their ancient mechanisms hummed, their lights glowed with an eerie blue energy. And then, a voice echoed through the air, deep and mechanical, yet unmistakably human. Protocol 0 to 1 activated. Final defense system engage. Vectel's heart pounded. Final defense system. His soldiers backed away as massive turrets unfolded from the ruins, their long dormant cannons now turning toward the sky. They weren't aimed at the Xilari. They were aimed at the human fleet. In orbit, the betrayal. The Xilari fleet was gone. The Valkyra, the pride of their empire, had been annihilated. The last remaining Xilari ships were nothing but burning wreckage, drifting through space. And yet, humanity's ancient fleet was still in position. They had won. The battle was over. So why were their weapons still charged? One of the human warships moved, positioning itself directly above the planet. Then, the warning lights on the ancient human fleet turned red, and the message echoed again, repeating its final order. Protocol 0 to 1 activated. Cleansing in progress. The human warships turned their guns downward, toward Earth. On the surface, the realization. Vectel's eyes widened. They're going to destroy their own planet. It made no sense. Why fight to reclaim it, only to erase it completely? Then it hit him. The Xilari weren't the real threat. Humanity had known, from the very beginning, that one day more civilizations would come. More conquerors, more invaders. And so, they had left one final trap. If Earth could not be saved, it would never belong to anyone else. The sky turned white. The orbital cannons fired, unleashing a planet-wide purge. From the towers, massive energy beams shot into the air, colliding with the weapons from orbit. The entire planet trembled as ancient human technology activated for one final war. Vectel and his soldiers could only watch as the very world beneath them began to tear itself apart. The endgame. Above, the human fleet continued their attack. Below, Earth's last defenses fought back. A war was raging, but not between humans and Xilari. It was humanity against itself. The past and the present collided. And Vectel, a soldier of the Xilari Empire, stood in the middle of it, realizing one final chilling truth. Humanity was never extinct. They were never defeated. They had simply waited for the right moment to remind the galaxy of one thing. They were still here, and they were still dangerous. Final words. As the sky burned and the ground split apart, Vectel sent out a final desperate transmission. Not to his empire, not to his people, but to anyone who was listening. A warning, the same warning humanity had left behind. Run.